This is Grace Pleahall, and you are listening to 89.1 FM, WNYU News. Killer Mike, whose real name is Michael Render, was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. He is a co-founder of Run the Jewels, a hip-hop duo consisting of himself and LP. While attending Morehouse College in the 1990s, Killer Mike met Big Boy of Outkast and began his rap career by featuring on their album Stankonia. While working as a voice actor and continuing to hone his music career, Mike began to move further into the realm of political activism. An outspoken critic of police brutality, the prison industrial system, and racial inequality, Killer Mike has begun to voice his opinions outside of Twitter. He's launched a college tour where he speaks to universities throughout the nation about racial issues in Ferguson, Missouri, and beyond. I had the pleasure of catching up with Killer Mike after his lecture at NYU. Here's what he had to say. I did want to ask you something, because I know that you enjoy smoking.
I do.
And recently, with the different legalization that's been happening across the U.S., I don't want to put too much of my opinion in this, but I think that some people are ignoring the fact that the black men who have been jailed for pushing basically are not going to get out of jail just because weed is legalized. God. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
I feel it's disgusting, and that's why I brought up in Reagan, just like the Bushes, Clinton, and Obama. Obama did something to repeal some of the federal sentencing guidelines, but in that same Al Jazeera documentary I talked about, they had one of the writers of the laws, the 500 grams in the drug laws. They had him, and he just, he spoke like, I know I made a mistake in retrospect, but no one's doing anything to retrospectively fix it. And the great travesty in that is not only have these unfair, like, I know a young lady who's her child's father got 30 years for marijuana. 30 years for something that grows. Like, how can a law outlaw something that eventually the universe just wanted to grow? It grows here. But the travesty in it is that not only have they locked away these men, essentially creating a slave labor force, they've locked away the men from a community that were audacious enough to be entrepreneurs. So when you look at the black community and say, where are the entrepreneurs? The entrepreneurial mindset is locked in prison. The people who had the gall to say, I'm willing to risk my personal finance to grow something. Now, moonshine, and I'm from the South, we celebrate moonshiners. Oh, moonshine gave us NASCAR. You got to have a rebel heart. We celebrate those guys, right? But in the height of moonshine, they were looked at as criminals, as bootleggers, as evil. And I'm saying it's maybe time to start doing that for nonviolent drug offenders. Mm-hmm. It's maybe time to say no one knew the type of damage it was going to cause. Now that we're past that damage, how do we fix the problem now? Because if we don't let these men out of jail to be the merchant class minds that we need, to be small store owners, to be gas station owners, to be shop owners, if we don't, they're going to get out of jail in the next 10, 15, 20 years, and they're just going to be dependents on society again. So we went from paying to keep them incarcerated to now they're going to get out of jail 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old men, and we're going to be paying to just watch them until they're done.
So how do we break the cycle?
How do you break the cycle is you put pressure on local, state, and federal government to reform those laws. And we try to do something that's retroactive that'll let some of these men out of prison earlier. And since we know that black male unemployment is such a treacherous and evil cycle that puts men in these cycles of crime and violence, we have to either come up with a black male jobs program, especially in urban areas like D.C., Washington, and or a black male or a black small business federal loan program in which we can be competitive by opening shops and stuff in our own community and becoming that merchant class with lower interest loans.
So you talk a lot about local government.
Yes.
How about national government? Do you think that we can reform these unjust laws and, having to do with the income gap and the drug wars and black imprisonment? Should we keep focusing outside the government, or do you think that people have the capability to go into the government and change things?
Well, I think people have the capability to go in the government and change things, but if you want to keep a politician courageous, you have to let them know they're being watched. You have to let them know you're willing to attack their source of income, meaning corporations that can give unlimited money to them. And the way you attack them is by taking your dollar from the corporation if they're doing things that you don't agree with. And the way you really become a rebel riser is you senators and congressmen that have to come back and be local, you aggravate the shit out of them. You literally make sure they know you to the point that when they're going to Washington, what's on their mind is their local constituency and not the will of whatever political party they're working for.
So the last question I'm going to ask is sort of an obvious one, and you touched on it, but maybe you could go a little further. How can we capitalize on the momentum that the Ferguson protests have given us?
I think we capitalize by continuing to protest in Ferguson, continuing to protest in Atlanta, because they are, continuing to protest in Los Angeles and New York. Continue to plot, plan, strategize, organize, and mobilize. I will know that the protests are truly successful when I see the kids who are at Occupy Wall Street with the kids who are at Ferguson. When we join forces, then we're truly going to be unstoppable. As long as we these pop-up protests, it's good to learn how to organize. It's good for organizing around particular issues. But once we become a synergy, radical protest machine that has the ability to stop dollars instantly going places, I think that the real wake-up call happens then. So don't stop protesting. Don't stop hitting the streets. Because when you protest, you meet people who don't look like you. And meeting those people, you form alliances that are unlikely, and you come up with new ways to solve these problems instead of the same old ways.
Thanks again to Killer Mike. For WNYU News on 89.1 FM and WNYU.org, I'm Grace Plehall.